What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Scouting Combine here on the Five Reasons Sports Network. I'm your co-host, Hussam Patel, and today my co-host, Eric Smith, joins me today as well. Eric, how we doing, my guy?
Hey, doing great. Getting ready to gear up for our high school football camp, before we gear up for the Dolphins football camp. So it's a great time of the year when, football's starting to get back into the swing of things.
We're back, but with high school football first, then college, then the NFL. We're swinging into the gear towards the end of July where football is finally back for a lot of athletes, high school, college, and pro. They're all dealing with training camp right now, putting their installs in as well. But today, Eric, what is our show topic and what are we talking about today?
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about, how the Dolphins defense can work without Christian Wilkins being here anymore. I mean, Christian Wilkins has been a huge part of the defense the last few years, playing, 90% of the snaps on through a lot of the games and throughout the course of a season. So it's definitely going to look different not having Christian Wilkins out on the field for us this year.
Of course, and today we have a special guest joined by 3 yards per carries, Alfredo Artiaga. Alfredo, how are we doing today?
Doing great. I can almost sense football in the air. We have Tyreek going on Sports Center. I was cutting up film yesterday. I'm getting ready for training camp in 11 days. So yeah, you could almost it's not here, but you could sense it's here.
Close.
It's very close. By the way, there was some news that dropped. I don't know if a lot of people have noticed it. There was a piece written by Tyler Dunn, I believe, yesterday. I read it today. Eric read it, and Alfredo, you read it as well. It looks like for the defense, the player wearing the green dot this season is going to be David Long Jr. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
I could go first if you want. It's kind of important because we thought that they might be a little bit more fluid with the roles on for the defense and on especially the linebackers. This basically confirms that David Long will be the fill linebacker and Jordan Brooks will be the scrape. Now, what does that mean? Scrape linebackers can play outside of the framework of the offensive line. Fill linebackers play inside of the tackles. They line up inside of the tackles and they run the alleys and they run the gaps inside the tackles. They run the A and the B gap. So he's going to be the fill, which is the role he filled last year that he had last year. Although last year they were a little bit more fluid with how they used him and Jerome Baker. This year, he's the green dot. He'll be the fill linebacker, which is the role that he's best for, really.
Eric, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, anybody that didn't read that piece, I definitely recommend going and reading that piece. It really, tells you a lot about David Long, and we talk about the type of player that you want wearing that green dot. Dude's a natural born leader. He's been through everything, had a lot of adversity in his life, and you know that he can handle, the pressure of having the green dot. And, I definitely have a higher level of respect for him off the field, in addition to the stuff that he's done on the field after reading that article. So I definitely recommend anybody that hasn't read it yet, go check it out.
Of course. And, my initial thoughts were, okay, the Dolphins brought in Jordan Brooks. I'm sorry. I'm still confusing Jerome Baker and Jordan Brooks. They just swapped from Miami to Seattle as well. They brought in Jordan Brooks to basically what I thought was to play the micro and be the communicator because he could have that experience in an Anthony Weaver type of system. Seattle's system is not going a major overhaul. Their defense was pretty similar to the Ravens last year in some terms. However, now they do have Mike McDonald from Baltimore. The Dolphins, obviously, of course, have Anthony Weaver, who is a disciple of Mike McDonald from last year's Ravens team as well. So I thought, okay, Brooks is going to be the guy. But after reading that piece, it's going to be David Long Jr. So it's going to be exciting to see throughout training camp, throughout preseason, and even the first 3 weeks of the season, how the linebacker play is going to be and how the communication, Eric, you and I talk about it all the time, especially with this defense, how this communication is going to work with David Long Jr. And this Dolphins defense. This is the first year where this Dolphins defense has a brand new communicator. Before it was Jerome Baker. Now it's going to be David Long Jr. How are the players going to react and respond to that as well? So it's gonna be something to see. All right, so we are going to go ahead first. Eric, This is not a David Long Jr. episode. This is actually an episode of the Dolphins defense. And we got to see how these fronts will work first, because the fronts on the defensive line, they may not change by much. You could have an extra defender uh, at most. You could be in a 5-2 look, or you could be in a 4-3 look, which we primarily were last year based on our fronts. It's going to differ whether it's going to be even, odd, maybe even bare as well, but the fronts are primarily going to stay the same. Here's one play we have here, a clip for you up against the Baltimore Ravens offense right here. You can see David Long Jr. on there along with Christian Wilkins and Zach Sealer. However, how is this Dolphins defense going to look without Christian Wilkins is the biggest key, because the Dolphins essentially brought in 3 to 4 guys that can replace Christian Wilkins' production for last year.
Yeah, so I think you're going to see a lot more faces. When you look at the way that the Dolphins have played, and it wasn't even just a Vic Fangio thing, even 2 years ago, both Zach Sealer and Christian Wilkins played a really high percentage of the snaps. I was looking through a list a little bit ago of the highest percentage snaps for defensive tackles, and Zach Sealer was, I think, number 5 on that list. So Wilkins was obviously higher than him. So when you look at the pair of them compared to what other teams across the league are doing, that's a really rare thing to have, even one player that's playing that high of a number of snaps. And the Dolphins have had 2 that have been doing it the last 2 years. The Ravens, on the other hand, had Madubuike playing at 73% of snaps, but nobody else was even at 50%. So, I think that's what we're going to see with the Anthony Weaver defense, and that's how the role of Christian Wilkins is going to be filled, that it's going to be guys that are playing more in situational type roles. Like Benito Jones isn't going to go out there and play 70% of snaps, but we could see him more on the rundown type situations. And somebody else like T.R. Tart may get more of the pass rush opportunities from the inside, opposite of Zach Sealer. I mean, Sealer is obviously still going to be our highest snap taker, but I think that we're going to see him more at a 65-70% of snaps versus the 85-90% of snaps that he's been playing the last few years. You're muted, Hussam.
What? It happens sometimes. All right, Eric. So walk Alpha and I through what the Dolphins front looks like in this play. And obviously, they're at the goal line. What does the Ravens offensive line look like? What is the Dolphins front, and what are you reading pre-snap?
Yeah, so I mean, this is still a nickel defense. You got your 4 defensive linemen, essentially. You got Van Ginkel and Chubb playing the outside linebacker, defensive end type roles. Then you got your 2 linebackers in Long and Duke Riley in there. And then, you have the safety rolled down into the box with the guy we got from the lines that I always seem to forget his damn name.
Deshaun Elliott.
Yes, Elliott. But, with the way that the Ravens are aligning here, even though they are in a 3 wide receiver set, that's all packed in pretty tight. And that's something the Ravens can do because there's always a threat of a run with the Ravens. So even if you have 3 wide receivers on the field, you still got to be aware of Lamar Jackson being able to run and just their running game in general.
All right, I'll go ahead and run the play. We had the motion. It looks like a run play. It's a play action. And let's take a look at the defensive linemen, Zach Sealer and Christian Wilkins right here, along with the edge rushers, and how they are playing their gaps. First of all, you're going to take a look at the point of attack, which is going to be the motion man, Andrew Van Ginkel. He looks like he's going to rush, but then he steps just a little bit back out to see if he can help and cover the motion man, which David Long has. So Van Ginkel hesitates right there. It looks like Christian Wilkins, he immediately gets doubled by Patrick Card and the right guard. Zach Sealer is playing one-on-one. They're both trying to attack the B gaps. Right here, both the defensive tackles, Wilkins and Sealer, are being doubled while Bradley Chubb is one-on-one. And I'll stop it right here. All right, Alf, what are you seeing?
Well, first of all, the play call was good. They correctly ascertained that it was going to be a pass, so they had a pass defense in. Um, the Ravens protected the hash, meaning they're on the right hash, so they slide protect left, and that's also very, very predictable. Now it's about getting home. It's unclear what they're keeping in. You have to keep running the play to see what they're keeping in, because as of right now, it looks like they just slide protect that left, and that's precisely what they did. They slide protected left, slipped the fullback. We lost him in the wash. We were in some type of match zone, and we just got beat one-on-one, essentially. But the play call is correct. They got a pass defense in for this play. The protection was also very, very predictable as well. There's nothing that fooled anybody here. This is just losing somebody in the wash and not covering everybody who's out there.
All right, next play we have there is up against the Eagles, and Alf, I believe you may have had this cut up on OnlyFins that you did as well. Why don't you go ahead and walk Eric and I through this play?
This is very interesting defensive front here, because they're in an even front, and if you run the play, and if first of all you see it, they're going to try to run 2-by-1 with both outside linebackers, both edge players, and they got Wilkins covering the center, while that's Sealer rushing 5-tech. Okay, this is really, really interesting, because this is something that the Ravens did a lot of last year, and this is something that they're going to do a lot of this year. You want to know how you can hide defensive tackles, especially when you have a bunch of them? Rush them on the center, occupy the center, and get a guard to move one way or the other. Okay, and if you can see right here, they have, I believe that is, I keep forgetting his name, Landon Dickerson. Landon Dickerson is peeking on Wilkins rushing the center, rushing 0, right? Which is essentially isolating Muliata. I keep forgetting his last name. Jordan Muliata, right? Is that correct?
Jordan Mailata.
Mailata,
with Zach Sealer. And now you got 2-by-1 on Lane Johnson with your two best pass rushers, which they could do all kinds of things, stunting left, right, inside out, pinch.
You see how Sealer just basically, he's stunting inside to create some pressure, make Jalen Hurts move off of his foot, but then you have nobody pressuring right here. It looks like Chubb may try to come across.
Also, very, very clear here. This is nothing like what we just saw in the Ravens clip. In the Ravens clip, they're basically on the goal line. They're on the right hash, and they call protect left. They protected the left hash by sliding the protection. This is straight up pass pro. And this is one of those cases where, man, you got a good pass rush on. They picked it up because that's a good offensive line. And one guy beats another, and it's just football.
Yeah.
They executed.
I think it's still a unique.
The Dolphins didn't.
Yeah, I think it's still a unique way to still have a contain rush on Jalen Hurts, because even though you're starting with your two outside linebacker types on one side of the line, like it would obviously be a mismatch to try to ask Zach Sealer to contain Jalen Hurts if he did try to, escape the pocket that way, if it was just a straight up 4-man rush. But with that stunt, you essentially end up with the same end picture as you would if you had just lined up with your outside linebackers outside and your tackles inside.
All right, next clip right here, shotgun formation. It looks like a very different front from the previous two ones we saw right here. You have Zach Sealer and Christian Wilkins. Way out wide, you have Wilkins basically shading as the 3. You have Sealer as the 5, and then you have Phillips and Chubb as the 9s here. Offensive line-wise, Eric, do you think they're going to be shifting over to the left because they have a majority of rushers on that side, or pre-snap, what would your offensive lineman be thinking right here?
So, I mean, there's obviously different ways you can do it, right? But there's going to be at least a half slide to the left. So Kelsey, left guard, left tackle, going to the left. Now, which way the guard goes, the guard could go out to Van Ginkel, or he could go to Baker. That's going to depend on, which side the running back would be assigned to. If there's a play action here where the running back's coming across, then he could be going to Van Ginkel. But, from what you just showed there. It looks like there's no play action. So the guard is going to go out to Van Ginkel.
You can
But
see right here, we're taking a look at Wilson. Wilkins is battling Kelsey one-on-one, but then Sealer comes in to take over both and create a stunt action for Christian Wilkins. And Alf, I know you did a study on it. We'll get to it a little bit later. And, Chris Kaufman of 3 yards per carry has said a lot of times on watching this Dolphins defensive front, Zach Sealer set up Christian Wilkins a lot. And Christian Wilkins is going to miss Zach Sealer. And the most important thing about it is that the Dolphins extended and signed Zach Sealer to a contract before Christian Wilkins because, number one, they're watching the tape. The coaches are telling the football executive staff and the administrative staff, hey, this guy is helping out our defense in different ways that is not on the stat sheet. Here's what it is. And they're like, okay, this is what may lead to increase in production for Jalen Phillips, Christian Wilkins, Bradley Chubb is there. So you're thinking when you're watching this, when you're Anthony Weaver, holy crap, I have a guy already who signed long-term for this defense that can set people up. The style of defense that Anthony Weaver wants to play, he is setting pass rushers up to succeed with his defensive tackles and defensive linemen by creating twists, by creating stunts, by creating man-on-man action as well, where their responsibility is to take on 2 or more blockers and have the pass rushers like Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb, Jordan Brooks, and David Long Jr. make plays behind the offensive line, pressure the quarterback, rush the quarterback, and ultimately grab turnovers.
You could take it back to the top of this play, so I could show you something. Okay, if you can see right here, this is basically an overfront. But if you look at the offensive line and what they're facing here, you can count the numbers: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? And you toss right away Jerome Baker for 2 reasons. There's a telltale sign. Okay, whenever you line up in the shotgun and you line up your running back to the left or to the right of the running back, you always see what is the reaction from the fill linebacker. Does he shade over or does he stay right on the hash, meaning right over the center, facing you? Okay. Usually when he shades a little bit over, it's probably man coverage or at least man under. If he stays in the middle, it's probably zone. So it's a telltale sign right away. But it's also a telltale sign for the offensive line. The offensive line is looking at this, and Jalen Hurts is not really going to change protections too much, okay? Because he knows that they have it covered. Jason Kelsey at this point right now is calling it, and he's probably saying something like, he's not coming, meaning the guy who's off the line. They're going to account for the 5 that are on the line. And if you watch them on their kick slide, it's perfect. They even ignore that Jerome Baker is pressing the hole to run out to the flat. Okay? Look at their kick. They pick up their man one-on-one. See it? Watch them. Look at them. See it? All of them are matched up one-on-one. 5 rushers, 5 blockers, all of them picked up. That's excellent. Excellent offensive line play. And I understand that he left the pocket. He just didn't throw it on time. You have more than a 2 count there to get rid of the football.
Eric, your thoughts?
Yeah, I agree completely. I agree with everything that Alf was saying there. I mean, it was a very good job of initial pass protection there. It was also a good job by Wilkins and Sealer in terms of their chemistry with, running that type of stunt, because there is a, timing aspect there with them as well. And that is, some of that unseen value of Sealer that isn't going to show up on the stat sheet, but you see him doing it every week. There's a lot of unselfish stuff that he does to create opportunities for other players, like you were saying earlier.
All righty. Next play up against the Eagles as well. You guys able to see it?
Yep.
All right. You have Wilkins over here up as the 0. You have Zach Sealer here as the 5. You have Phillips out on the 7, and Bradley Chubb is basically a stand-up pass rusher. So you have your 4 men here at the line. Pass bro, empty set.
Here again, what you have is when you have Chubb and Phillips, you have another 2-by-1 rush,
Right.
and Sealer's rushing. It's more like a 6, but it's what we could call it 5, and it's an even front. It's another even front 2-by-1 this time, and this is what they did a little bit earlier. Dolphins were pretty good with this. I'm interested to see how they block this again, because the Eagles. I saw that game, and Dolphins had a lot of pressure on Jalen Hurts. I didn't think that the defense played particularly bad in this game, but that offensive line was just fabulous. They were the MVPs of that game. And I know A.J. Brown had the big numbers. That offensive line right there, look, they slid again. They slid to the hash, and they picked it up. And you had a spy there with Bradley Chubb, essentially. He presses, and he doesn't come. And they recognize it immediately. Look at it. They don't even get hands on him. You see it? What you want to do there, run it right back to the top. What you want to do right there, you want to run it a little bit closer. Like, notice Bradley Chubb. When he comes on this rush, you almost want to make contact with 78. I know 78 was in for Juergens, so that was a backup. You almost want to make contact. He doesn't. 78 doesn't even get hands on him because he knows he's not coming. This is again fabulous offensive line play. You want to make contact there if you're Bradley Chubb. You want to have that guard commit, because if that guard commits to putting hands on you, that's one less blocker, and you know you're not coming, right? So might as well occupy a guy without even coming on the pass rush.
So Eric, if you're not playing the Eagles offensive line every single week like this, can this work without Christian Wilkins?
Yeah, absolutely. Like Alpha was saying, the Eagles offensive line is one of the best in the league, and kind of where that comes down to, if you watch as they are dropping into their pass sets, they're staying very much on the same level. And kind of to Alf's point there, if you can get number 78 to commit to trying to block Bradley Chubb there, then it changes those levels and creates some opportunities, some gaps for those pass rushes. But the Eagles do a good job of not getting excited, and this right guard is not used to blocking a Bradley Chubb type player, right? If we get him in space against Bradley Chubb, that's a win for us every time. But he shows good discipline in staying at the same level as Kelsey and Lane Johnson, so that when Chubb doesn't come, he's still in position to help out elsewhere. So like Alpha was saying, like when you're doing this, you really want to press that a little more and try to get him to commit, because it does open up other stuff there. And you see him able to get in there and help with Wilkins.
Right. All right.
Overall, that can certainly work. And when you're playing a quarterback that's not Jalen Hurts, then that, when Bradley Chubb's coming around as that looper, he's not always going to be a spy either. Sometimes you're looping around and dipping around that corner and trying to get an unblocked sack right up the middle, but you don't do that versus Jalen Hurts as much.
All right, now let's get to some film from when Anthony Weaver was the defensive line coach for the Baltimore Ravens, so that way we can see, some of the similarities and some of the differences as well. Let me go ahead and pull it up. Eric, are you aware of the down and distance on this play right here?
I do not have those notated for these.
Okay, that's fine. That's okay. All right, go ahead and run it.
8 yards to go, because I see the extra point line there, so we're pretty close to the goal line.
Okay.
And also, let me explain, because I saw Pablo Torre this week was saying that sometimes we get into jargon and we don't explain things all that well when we're talking about watching film and showing film. There's simple rules to fronts in the NFL, and somewhat in college and high school as well, but mostly in the NFL. You're going to see teams always play even front usually when they're expecting a run, and you're going to see them play odd fronts when they're expecting a pass. Even front is when you cover 2 guys on the offensive line. You cover at least 2 guys. You cover the center, you cover the guard, or you cover the center, you cover the tackle. But usually it's you refer to even fronts when you cover 2 guys on the interior offensive line. Okay, so you're going to cover a center and a guard, or you're going to cover both guards. Okay. Odd fronts is when you have guys in the gaps usually, and you usually only have one guy rushing either head up, or you have nobody covering anybody, and almost everybody is either in a wide 9 stance outside or in 3 tech or one shade, okay, in the A gap. So usually for pass, you want guys in the gaps. For runs, you want guys head up on offensive linemen. You want to occupy offensive linemen. So those are simple rules for the NFL. And the other simple rule for the NFL is you play an honest front, meaning you're pretty much even when the ball is in the middle of the field. When the ball's in the right hash, you always have the 3 tech to the right side of the defense or to the offense's left hash. And and it's always the opposite the other way around. So when they're on the left hash, you always have the 3 tech to the left hash and to your left side of the defense to the right side of the offensive line. And right here, this is another instance where the play call is correct. Once again, they've ascertained it's pass, and it's a pass defense front. Like they're ready to come on a pass rush here.
Go ahead and run the clip right here, then we can analyze it right after. All right. We see a slide over to the right-hand side, Eric, post-snap. All right. On the front, Eric.
Let me interrupt for a second. Sometimes you see how the ball is in the middle of the field and there's slide protecting right, and it seems counterintuitive because you have Jeff Wilson in the backfield, right? So you feel like you have a lot of numbers. You have 4 numbers to block 2, right? This is all about trusting Teron Armstead. They're saying we're sliding right. Why? Because we don't care. We don't care if Nick Bosa's rushing out there. We're trusting Teron Armstead with whoever rushes on him.
Right.
And
I think
in this case, it's Owe, right? That's rushing him. And Armstead stones him. And Tua delivers a strike for the touchdown.
Right. All right. Now, Eric, imagine this is the Dolphins defense. You have Zach Sealer over there, maybe Calais Campbell, Jalen Phillips, Bradley Chubb. How are you playing this right now? Or how is this playing alive inside your head if this was the Dolphins front?
I feel like in a lot of ways you almost have to do it the way that the Dolphins did here. Like it looks to me like a half slide protection to the right where your left guard is man-on-man with that A-gap defender because he doesn't slide quite as much as the other ones do. But your only other option would be to fully commit that guard to the outside, and you don't necessarily want to do that. You know, you can, especially when you have somebody like Teron Armstead, you can have confidence sliding to the right and knowing that Teron Armstead's going to do a good job over there. And that gives you, you have one extra blocker, right? They've got 4 guys down and you have one extra blocker. So you can either send him over to help Teron Armstead, or we can keep it to the right and create a 3-on-2 on the right side to handle any kind of twists or anything that comes that way.
Right. And look, the Dolphins were able to get pressure with 4 defensive linemen basically rushing the passer most of the time. They were, I believe, top 5 in pressure percentage last season, and I think they were top 5 also in sacks. But that's with a different scheme, right?
Yeah, they were 3rd in sacks, and
Third in
I think
sacks.
number 1 in pressures. I think they were 3rd in quarterback hits. No, they had a spectacular pass rush last year.
Right. And I wish we had a run play in here because this is pretty much for the pass. Because do you think, Eric, this Dolphins pass rush, if this was a pass play, let's say up against, let's say the offense was either the Bills or the Chiefs or the 49ers, could this work where they could be generating some type of pressure?
It's tough in the NFL to just generate pressure with just a traditional pass rush without any kind of twists or stunts. It's difficult to do that against anybody. Your best bet with something like this would be to try to find that mismatch where you're getting a Jalen Phillips or a Bradley Chubb, where you can kind of dictate which way the line is sliding to create a one-on-one opportunity. With a tackle that you feel is a favorable matchup. But typically it's in the offense's favor if you're just rushing straight ahead.
All right, next play, I believe the Dolphins are here at the 15-yard line. You're basically running empty. You have 3 wide receivers over to the right-hand side. You have 2 on the left. You have 1 defensive tackle, 2 defensive ends, and a linebacker right here. And what do we call this front, Alf?
Well, that's it's an odd front, but it's also extremely odd also that you get your fill linebacker and just place him over the tackle. This is again, it's an odd front, but it's another 2-by-1 rush. This time, I don't know if they're going to bring him or not, but if they do bring Roquan Smith, his job is to try to free up the pass rusher on that side by either, like he's doing right there, diving to the inside to try to isolate him. Wow, I hated that play when I saw it.
I was sitting right in front of that play.
Oh boy.
It was brutal.
And the protection the Dolphins employ here is pretty much the same thing that we keep seeing, which is we trust Teron Armstead against anybody. We'll slide right regardless. And this is actually counterintuitive because you can look at the numbers. Like you could go right back pre-snap. You could go back pre-snap. Ball's on the right hash, and you can count the numbers. Okay. The guy. Look, sometimes the NFL, football is pretty simple. A guy lines up over him, you count him. Okay, you count him as covered. And if you look at the way that they're lined up, maybe you might slide protection to the hash. Okay, you might protect the left hash. Okay, because 44 is leaning. You see, the only thing that is kind of a cue, but Tua I don't even think sees it, is he runs his guy across. You see, he runs his guy across in motion, and 44 bails on his technique. You see it? He kind of moves. If I'm the quarterback, and I don't think he saw it, but if I see that, I know not only is it zone, but he's not coming. So I got time here. By the way, bad snap.
And I think if you roll that back and you look at Queen on the left side there, you're looking at his stance
right here.
That kind of stand-up stance, even though he's pretty far off the ball, like to me, he looks a lot more like he may come than Humphrey on the other side with that kind of stance. Like he doesn't look like he's in a great position to be able to mirror a receiver that he's trying to cover. So that may have been another key also to indicate which way they're going. You can see that right off the snap that Austin Jackson there has his eyes on Queen and is, basically expecting
he knew he was coming.
there.
Look at his stance.
Yep. Yeah, he's just trying to give a little bit of help inside, but he knows that his primary accountability is going to be Queen coming off.
Oh boy, that was a really bad snap by Liam Eichenberg. Oh. So it's 5 coming. You have a pressure 5 look right here. And basically it gets picked up by this Dolphins offensive line. But again, if you have, let's say, Zach Sealer, Jordan Brooks right here, maybe Bradley Chubb, maybe Mo Kamara, Chop Robinson right here, and you could have another linebacker right here in David Long, right?
Well, David Long he'd be the fill, so he'd be in Roquan Smith's.
Yeah, okay. David Long would be right here, and then Brooks right here.
Yep. He'd be lined up inside of where the offensive line is.
Or maybe this could be Anthony Walker Jr. as well. Just saying.
Well, I believe this happened on third down, this play.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah, so this will be a Dolphin sub package, which means that David Long would be out, and that would be Jordan Brooks in Roquan Smith's role and Anthony Walker out there in the Patrick Queen role, or reversed, either way.
Still, this is a different way to get a pressure 5 look as well, either nearby the goal line or on a pass play on third down. All right, next play right here, Eric. What are you looking at on the defense and offensive line?
Yeah, so Alf alluded to earlier, like don't make football hard. You got five defenders on the line there. You got 5 offensive linemen, so should be seeing a half fly protection to the right where everybody is just man-on-man protection.
Go ahead and run it right here. 5-on-5 man protection right here. There we go. You have the twist coming from inside to outside right there. pressure right there on the face. And
Yep, Liam's a
this
little
yeah.
late adjusting there. Rob Jones does a good job on this one of taking his initial pass set, but then shuffling to the inside as soon as he sees that inside move. And, Liam's just a little slow getting over there.
A
Still
little late
keeps.
picking it up, but that's how you generate pressure
Yep.
right there. And if you don't have a quarterback with a quick release or, an offense that has routes designated for different parts of the field, or if you're doing, standard pass pro, this becomes a pretty difficult throw to make, and the quarterback has to make an adjustment. They have to change. I don't have the schedule in front of me, but I can go ahead and take a look and see what quarterbacks are playing in the beginning of the year. They play Trevor Lawrence, Josh Allen, Geno Smith, and Will Levis. We know how Josh Allen is. Trevor Lawrence, with pressure in his face, we know sometimes he can succumb to pressure. So this style of defense should be able to work, especially on third downs. I have not watched a lot of Geno Smith and Seahawks, so I cannot comment on that. But you're playing up against Will Levis again, and then you're going to have the rookie Drake May as well, and this is going to be his first time seeing it. So this could work out for the Dolphins' favor in the beginning of the season. Alf, do you have a different input or a different viewpoint?
Yeah, I agree. Out of all those quarterbacks, look, Will Levis wasn't very good against the Dolphins last year until he was. He was good in the last 3 minutes of the game. Otherwise, he was not very good in that game. I don't think that we're going to see Drake May. The rumor is that he's not going to play this season for New England. So we're going to see Jacoby Brissett. Geno Smith, out of all those quarterbacks, is probably the most sound as far as a pocket passer. Josh Allen, we've seen him play. Like, he'll just he rarely will step up into the pocket. He's one of these guys that feels pressure either on his blind side or in his face, and he slides to deliver the football. Geno Smith is a guy that will step up into the pocket, will feel the pocket to throw the football. Trevor Lawrence is a guy that tends to fade off of pressure.
Right.
So if he can see it, like Trevor Lawrence is a guy that you really don't want to sneak up on with your pass rush. You want him to see your guys coming, because if he sees your guys coming, he tends to drop his eyes and then fade away to throw the football because he does have a very, very strong arm and he trusts it. So he's a guy that you really don't want to disguise too many things. You want to actually show him your pressures.
Right. And then we get to the later part of the season, Eric, where we see Jordan Love, maybe potentially Aaron Rodgers, if he's healthy, if his ayahuasca treatment and voodoo shit works out for him. Then you have basically quarterbacks in the disciple of the Shanahan tree. You have Jordan Love, CJ Stroud, Brock Purdy, and a little bit of it in.
Yeah, those guys you got to fool. Like the Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love, those guys you have to fool.
Yeah, and from that perspective, the schedule definitely aligns better in that regard. Like we've talked about the communication among the defenders, and how there was some struggles with that earlier in the year last year, trying to adjust to the Vic Fangio stuff. And we've talked about how you can see that with the Baltimore's defense, the way that they're communicating and moving around. So I would much rather see those quarterbacks later in the year when our guys should be able to communicate and disguise stuff better without leaving open, receivers running wide open because of blown coverages and stuff like that. Definitely something I'd rather see later in the year than getting those guys early when we're still stuck with vanilla defenses because they're still sorting out the communication and that type of thing.
Right. This last play right here, and Alf will get into the run stuff. Don't have any clips for the run stuff, but this is a standard pass play right here. Standard pass defense, 4 rushers. You're playing zone as well. Quick pass. I mean, there's nothing much you can do from a pass rush perspective up against the quick pass like this. Before we go, though, Alf, we know you did a film study on the run defense for the Dolphins and seeing how they fared when Christian Wilkins was not on the field, along with Raekwon Davis, because they are both no longer Dolphins. So,
or when they were blocked one-on-one and were inconsequential to the play.
Okay.
So What I tried to look for is, I explained it earlier. When you're calling defenses in the NFL, you're not necessarily guessing, but you kind of know which are the rundowns, which are the pass downs, right? And sometimes you will throw out a defense, not really a defense, but a front to combat what you think is coming. You think it's a rundown, you might throw out an even front. Ravens play a lot of even fronts on rundowns. So that's something that you can expect this coming season. The personnel that they've brought in from all of those defensive tackles suggests that they will play a lot of even fronts against on rundowns, let's just say. Okay. So what I did is I did a study. You could go to the top of that, top of the tweet. If you could go right there, and I'll read along. I charted even fronts that season. I tended to toss, like right there, you can see, to avoid credit going to players no longer here, I excluded all Wilkins and Davis wins in even fronts, meaning any play that they made, I tossed. And by the way, they were extremely good with Wilkins and Davis in even fronts. All double teams. Anytime that the offensive line double teamed either Wilkins or Davis, I tossed those plays as well. All the games versus bottom 10 run games. Look, the simple fact of the matter is that the Dolphins dominated against bad run teams last year. Nobody really ran on them all that well except the Chargers and the Patriots a little bit in that first game. All games with scoreboard pressure, meaning Dolphins were up by 3 scores or 2 scores. Sometimes teams, if they run on you, you're going to be in a pass defense, and they're just going to get cheap yardage. I tossed all of those plays. What I did include, and I made a list of it, all plays run at Zach Sealer or Deshaun Hand over the guard or the tackle in even fronts, meaning whenever Zach Sealer or Deshaun Hand were covering the guard or the tackle. All the plays that were blocked well, one-on-one against Wilkins and Davis, meaning that they were not part of the play. All plays with scoreboard pressure, meaning Dolphins were down too much. So the Dolphins just ran the ball to kill clock. The defense is protecting against the pass, so you might get cheap yardage. Same thing against the Dolphins. I tossed all of those plays. And then games from teams that performed at or above league average running the ball. So the sample that I used was the game at the Chargers, at Buffalo, the Raiders, at Kansas City, the Dallas Cowboys at home, at Baltimore, Buffalo at home, and at Kansas City in the playoffs. So I used very, very good teams, a good sample size. Those were the results. Dolphins have an even fronts. It was 28 carries for 51 yards, and the 2 longest runs were 2 runs of 4 yards each. And that was week 1 against the Chargers and week 4 against the Bills. So the takeaway from this is Zach Sealer is underappreciated and is a fabulous run defender over the guard or over the tackle as a 5 tech. So I do expect the Dolphins to have a good run defense this coming season.
All right, Alf, thank you so much for going. I know you got to go. You'll go back to your podcast over on Discord on OnlyFans. By the way, check it out on Discord for, I believe it's $2.99 a month on Discord, but we advertise it as $3 a month. It's going to be www.discord/OnlyFans as well.
Yeah, it's discord.gg/OnlyFans. And you can become a member there for $3 a month or $2.99 a month. I just say 3.
Of course. Thank you so much, Alf, and we will talk to you soon.
Thank you for having me on.
Thanks, Alf.
All right, man.
All right, so Eric, help me out over here. If the Dolphins are going to be playing primarily even fronts on defense, how are opposing offenses going to run on them if this does carry over into the season?
How are they going to run on them? I mean, the same way that you're going to try to run on any team. Like you're going to try to find where the openings are in the alignment, right? If they have somebody like Chop Robinson in there, we could see them trying to target that type of player. Like Alf said, I think that Zach Sealer is really underrated, and like we talked about earlier with the twist with the pass rush, he does a really good job of holding the point of attack. He's got really long arms and plays with good leverage and does a really good job of clogging things up where even though he may not be racking up the sack numbers or knifing in to make plays, and he does do that. But even more than that, he just stacks it up at the point of attack and, lets other guys make the plays. And when we were looking at Calais Campbell, you saw a lot of the same stuff there with him as well. So once we get to the point where we have Chubb back, we have Phillips back, and we can get a good rotation on the edge, I'm really looking forward to what that run defense looks like with Zach Sealer and Calais Campbell, who are both just long guys that play with really good leverage for their size and do a good job of, keeping their chest clean and being able to clog things up. If you can, have one of those guys on each side of the ball, it's going to make it really difficult for any team to run against the Dolphins.
Right. And I'll pull up this presentation here as well, where we can see the EPA between the pass and the rush from 2 seasons, 2022 and 2023, up against the pass and the rush as well. Drop back EPA per play allowed is basically the EPA, or how efficient you are in guarding as a pass defense up against opposing pass plays right here. Take a look at the Ravens right here on drop back EPA per play. They are top five in the NFL for the last 2 years. Up against the run on rush EPA itself, they're 8th. Just one hair short of the Miami Dolphins year over year. So you have some of the same personnel, and Zach Sealer, David Long Jr., Bradley Chubb, and Jalen Phillips, along with new additions, and Jordan Brooks, Anthony Walker Jr., obviously from the Cleveland Browns, as well Jordan Brooks from the Seahawks, along with a revamped secondary. If we take a look at just last year alone, go ahead and update it. The Ravens defense, I believe, was number 2 in EPA per play. And drop back EPA, they were number 2. In rush, they were, I believe, 16th, just 2 hair shorts of the Dolphins. So in terms of efficiency, in terms of productivity, we should not see a decrease, and hopefully we do see an increase there with hopefully a better style of defense that mirrors and matches the players and the personnel, along with better communication in the secondary, a fluid, versatile secondary that can play multiple positions, and that should help. Speaking on paper, obviously we have to see how they're going to look like once the full games are played for the first 3-4 weeks of the season and towards the end of the season. All right, Eric, what you got planned for this weekend, my man?
Like I said, we're heading to football camp, so leaving bright and early, 6:00 tomorrow morning, and 3 practices a day through Monday. Going to be 90 degrees, going to be awesome.
All right, Eric, thank you so much as well. And thank you guys for watching the Scouting Combine here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Stick with us for Dolphins coverage with 3 yards per carry. Check us out on OnlyFins on Discord, brought to you by 3 yards per carry, along with the Pulse of Fins Nation, hosted by Louis D. Sung and Eric as well. As always, y'all, go Fins.